Hello all, this is Mike from Dynamic Point. Thank you so much for joining our brief webinar here, half an hour, regarding invoice automation using Office 365. I'm showing top of the hour. I'll give it 1 or 2 more minutes to go ahead and get started. Again, thank you so much for joining. Again, we're just giving it 1 or 2 more minutes for others to join. We'll start here briefly. Thank you again for your time. All right, I think it's about time. I'm showing 2 after. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Again, as way of introduction, my name is Mike. I head up business development here for Dynamic Point. We also have Richard on the phone on our team, and we'll be tag teaming this. I'll probably be the main commentator as we're going through it, but Richard could join in, of course, obviously where he sees fit. Today's schedule is a brief one. It's a half an hour, so I'm gonna try to stay to that the best of my ability. If you have any questions, I know everyone's muted, but feel free to put some questions in the question control as we're going through this, and I'd be happy to answer those given any breaks in the action. So let's go ahead and get started, no further ado here. So again, sharing my screen, that should be good. All right, as way of introduction again to the company, so Dynamic Point, we've been around since 2009. Our goal in life here is we create apps on top of Office 365. So for those of you who are familiar with Office 365, it is a whole app development framework provided, of course, by Microsoft. And obviously there's the more common aspects of the subscription that we know, like Outlook and Excel and PowerPoint and things like that, but it also gives a whole framework for companies like us to build applications. And the analogy that I like to draw there is it's very similar like to adding an app to your mobile phone, right? I add an app to my mobile phone and ask me all these questions that we probably ignore by now. Can I use your camera? Can I use your location or whatever? We probably just say yes to them all, but that of course is the app using this framework. And we do that same thing. And why would we use this framework? I mean, the obvious reason is most of our customers already own it. So by using this framework, we are leveraging what they already own and giving them a product and a answer to a business process or a business problem that uses what they own. So hopefully we're going to do it at a better cost because again, we're using this framework that you've already purchased from our friends at Microsoft. Our history is a little longer than this, right? So we have grown up creating on-premise products on top of SharePoint. Before that, we were doing custom solutions. But within the past 6 or 7 years, all of our apps have been Office 365 based once that framework became out and gained popularity. So that's who we are as a company. Our product portfolio, we have several products. We have a portal product. Essentially what this does is turns in Office 365 SharePoint extranet into a portal for either customers or vendors, but allowing the collaboration of ERP and CRM data. We have an expense management product that allows employees to capture receipts via their mobile, submit them for review, account coding, and ultimate ERP integration. We're going to absolutely ignore both of these guys for today, and we are going to focus on this guy right here, which is our AP automation product. The AP automation product is basically intended to automate everything that happens to an invoice before it's ready to come into my ERP system. So that's the receipt of this invoice. I'll show all kinds of methods of how we could capture these invoices. It's the workflow associated to it. It's using OCR, or optical character recognition, to extrapolate data. Generally speaking, AP management, which involves not only account assignment, but maybe PO matching. And then we're going to bring this invoice into an ERP system ready to be posted and paid. So this product is not trying to replace any of the functionality existing in your ERP or your accounting system, but rather augment it by automating a process that, generally speaking, is more manual, done via emails and routing things and things like that. So that's just an introduction to us as our portfolio. Again, given a little bit more context to what it means to be an Office 365 app. Again, we're leveraging this platform. What that means for us is our app actually gets installed as an add-in to SharePoint. So if you're familiar with SharePoint, SharePoint is sort of the basis for a lot of Microsoft stuff, right? Like if you're familiar with Teams, it uses SharePoint extensively. If you're familiar with OneDrive, it uses SharePoint extensively. Obviously, SharePoint itself uses it, but it is the framework for a lot of things Microsoft, and so it is for us too. So it's providing the security, the branding, the framework. All of these invoices are going to be stored in SharePoint, right? It is the home. We are not storing your data. It's all within your Office 365 environment. Microsoft has this other crazy cool tool by the name of Power Automate. It is their workflow, essentially Swiss Army knife. You know, I could connect to other systems, I could do approvals, I could do escalations, I could see if people are out of the office, I could do nagging reminders if they don't respond to me. It is by all means a very robust workflow tool for automating business processes. And of course, today we're going to apply that to invoice approval. These guys, Power Apps and Forms, right? So these are sort of Microsoft's ability to create apps and forms and things like that. And we use them for capturing invoices. Maybe I want to submit one via my mobile, take a picture of it. Maybe I want to give a check request because my invoice is going into a manager and I want them to submit it. So we're going to show you different ways you could use these tools to capture invoices in a more regimen fashion than just like capturing them via email. If you use email, that's fine. I can show you that as well, but these are just additional tools to help expand that. Last but not least, Power BI. Power BI is the reporting tool of choice. Given all this data is sitting here in SharePoint, I could begin using these analytics and these reports to start analyzing that data and build dashboards and KPIs. Okay, so enough of the introduction. Now we're going to talk about the process and we're going to go right to the demo for the sake of keeping this going. So the demo basically entails 3 steps, right? So when it comes to invoice automation, generally speaking, I like to simplify it into 3 major steps. One is the getting of the invoice, right? I got to get this invoice from a vendor, and it's going to come in via various methods. So this broad step here is, invoice receipt. And again, we support different ways to capture this invoice. It could come via email. I could take a picture of it. I could, give my vendors a portal. I could drag and drop it. I could scan it. But all of these are going to come into this library. If you're familiar with Office 365 SharePoint libraries, that's exactly what this is. It is our Dropbox, it's our funnel, it's our garbage disposal. I've heard it called all kinds of things, right? But this is where all the invoices are going to come in for processing. Doesn't matter how they get there. And that's going to kick off this second step here, right? And this is where we apply the app, we apply templates, we do PO matching, we're querying vendors from an ERP system, we're looking at PO items, we do all the hardcore accounting stuff that needs to be done for the invoice. This is also where we apply workflow, right? So if I need this for review and approval, if I need to check something in the ERP to see whether or not it's within a given threshold, things like that, to see if it's already been received, right? I got an invoice, but it hasn't been received, so I don't want to pay it yet. That is the brain behind those decision processes. And the third and final step, of course, is this accounting integration. Accounting integration comes in many different fashions. It usually depends on the type of invoice. If it's a PO invoice, we're going to create one type of transaction. If it's not a PO invoice, we're going to create another. All right, so let's get to it. So here we have it. Here's our Invoice Automation app. And as you can see, and as promised, it is nothing more than a SharePoint site. SharePoint allows me to add apps, right? So if I were to go to the site content here, what you're going to see is our app has been added, right? So that's the deployment. We give you an app and you add it to Office 365. It's as easy as that. So the various calls to action I have here, which by the way are highly configurable on how you want to do this, but the way I've laid out my site is, this is step one. This is my garbage disposal, right? The invoice is coming into the system. This is my processing queue, otherwise known as step two. And this is just a link to my ERP, otherwise known as step three. So we're going to go through each of those. Again, I have some sample reports here, just some examples of what can be done with Power BI. I could also show you fancy Excel reports and things like that, but this is just to give you a gist of what's possible using the Power BI reports. All right, so we're gonna go back to step one, and step one is I wanna get an invoice. And if you recall to my slide, it's all coming into a library. And here's a library. It's not very exciting. In fact, it's an empty library, so that makes it even less exciting. But the reason I'm going to show you this is because there's so many ways to capture invoices to a library. So I'm going to show you some, but the idea here is to sort of get you thinking on what's possible. How do I receive invoices? How do I want to extract metadata from these invoices? So am I receiving them for different locations? Do I have different inboxes? All of that, of course, is possible. So I'm going to start off with the probably most common scenario of an email being submitted by a vendor. So I have to wear many hats in the sake of this demonstration. So I'm going to be a vendor for a brief minute here. And I'm going to say I want to submit an invoice for payment, right? So I have my Acme invoice here, $110, and I'm going to submit it to AP at dynamicpoint.com, which of course would be your AP inbox. So voila, I'm just going to hit send. And what we're going to see is that invoice is going to be received by this library. And for the sake of disclosure, no one is hanging out waiting for this to happen. It's sort of like watching paint dry. But if I leave you with an understanding of how this works, you can see how cool it is and how it uses Office 365 technology. So sometimes I look really good and it happens in a brief second, and other times I'm refreshing like a madman. Aha, we got it. All right, so invoice comes in, right? Comes into this library. If we watch really quickly here and we watch these columns, they're gonna be populated. What just happened? When any invoice is received to this library, I have OCR set up for it. Everything gets submitted to OCR. We extrapolate all of this data that we need. And then voila, it's gone, right? Our app picked it up, it's been submitted, data has been recognized, and we're ready to process this. Again, this is not a sexy step, right? This is by all means behind the scenes, but the reason I show you this is because if you are aware of what you could do with Office 365, I could do all kinds of cool things, right? If I want to drag and drop to this library, sure, why not, right? I could upload, I could put a new file here. If I'm more of a Teams jockey, I want to upload from Teams, here's Teams, I could upload an invoice directly here, right? I could do all that. I could integrate with this library. If I have a scanner that could save to SharePoint, I could do that. If I want to give my employees a check request form, so I'm tired of you guys submitting all these invoices and me having to track them all down, I want to give you a form. And on this form, I want to require things that I'm ultimately going to use for account coding or workflow. I'm going to require such things as cost center. So again, this is just using a Microsoft form, right? I'm not hiding it, it's right here. I could add all the fields I want in the world. But what this does is gives me the ability to capture more data from whoever's submitting this invoice. Why are you submitting it? What's it for? Is it for a PO? I could put all that data here. And if I were to, again, submit an invoice, oop, that wasn't the one I wanted. Let's do sample invoice. And then say, please pay ASAP. And if I were to submit this, this is again a Microsoft form. Microsoft Forms absolutely have the ability to save to the library. So if again, I sat here and refreshed like a madman, which I'm not gonna drag you through again, you would see that it's going to be submitted. Oh, there it is. Submitted to this library. All of the data of the form has of course, been captured, and then voila, it's going to disappear. So let's keep going on that thought, right? Like, hey, maybe I want to give my vendors a form, right? And put that on my website. This is the same idea. They could go here, fill out this form, put any specifics, upload an invoice, and again, submit it, right? And I could use this form to automate things that I previously maybe had to track down manually. I could require my vendors to tell me certain things like which, project is this for, which PO is this for, and they could submit it. If I am out and about, right, and I have invoices, maybe I'm working from home and I want to submit them, or maybe your company has traveling employees, if that's still a thing, and they need to submit invoices from the road. Well, you could do that too. So if again I were to drag over my phone right here and hope nothing embarrassing comes across for this brief moment, Microsoft has this tool called Onedrive, right? Onedrive allows me to take pictures of things and submit them to SharePoint libraries. So I'll go to Easy AP, I'll go to my invoice upload, I'll take a picture, and voila, right? That's going to be submitted to that library. It's going to kick off OCR. It's going to be submitted for processing. Same thing as all of the others. All right, so I think I've beaten that first step to death, right? So what I was focused on was this guy. Oops, sorry. Click happy. All of the ways I could get an invoice into the system. So let's see what happens to those now that I have them in, right? So let's go back here, and now we want to go to step 2 in this process. So I'm going to take off, my vendor hat, and now I'm going to put on my accounts payable hat. And what I'm going to see is all those invoices that I've submitted are sitting here now, right? I have them in my queue. And I'm going to start showing you stuff about what happened when these invoices were created. So let's start looking at this in a little bit more detail. So you saw me click that. That was, of course, the invoice itself. OCR got the number, so that's cool. It got the date, it got the amount. I used a template to assign a company. I have a multiple company install here. The vendor came from the submission email, right? So that I have a mapping of those domains to vendors. So I could take whoever submitted it and automatically assign a vendor in my ERP. By the way, we don't store vendors. They're all queried from the ERP. We don't want to have to maintain them separately, so we call them in real time from the ERP. You can see the status is auto-created, right? That means the invoice came in, it was submitted. I have not initiated a workflow yet. If I want to automatically kick off a workflow, you better believe I absolutely can. But in this case, I wanted to slow things down a little bit so I could look at the invoices coming in before kicking off workflow. The other thing, this guy miraculously got accounts, right? And it got assigned such things as cost centers and expense types and locations, etc., which I could accept or edit or allocate to more, right? So there's all kinds of options there. But what I used, again, is a concept in our system of a template. This vendor comes in, they provide a software, so go ahead and default it. And if I have to change it, of course I can. If I have to do a new allocation, of course I can. But the idea there is that we're limiting keystrokes by automatically applying those defaults. Now, what if this was a PO invoice? Of course, it comes in the same way, but the line items get a little bit more interesting, right? If I look at this, as opposed to assigning GL accounts, I have PO line items. Where did they come from? Directly from the ERP. We don't know anything about POs, so we query that from the ERP in real time, and those automatically get added when the PO number is recognized from OCR. So other things going on, you can see some validation here. I got little error messages. That's a duplicate detection that we're using, saying that this already exists. In other words, this vendor has already submitted this invoice. This one appears to pass, so I'm gonna go ahead and submit that one. That's gonna kick off workflow. I'm gonna go ahead and submit my PO one for the fun of it, just to have a couple in the queue. That's gonna kick off workflow, etc. So the workflow, if you recall, again, back to my slide, is going to leverage our friend Power Automate, right? And Power Automate is configurable as heck, but the way I have my workflow set up is based off of a hierarchy of cost centers and dollar thresholds. Let me rephrase that. For non-PO. For PO, I'm using exception rules to see whether or not it's within or over a given tolerance of the PO, because in theory, the PO has already been approved. So the invoice could be auto-approved if it comes in the correct amount. So the PO, I'm using thresholds. For the non-POs, I have a cost center hierarchy. So now I have to be a manager, right? So I'm gonna leave my accounts payable sort of dashboard view, and I'm gonna pretend to be a manager. And a manager, of course, is gonna get a notification that they have something new to review. And much like all of the ways I have to submit invoices, I have gobs of ways I could approve invoices, but we're gonna start off with the sort of simple ones first. We're gonna start off with email. And as you could straight up see, this is Microsoft Flow, right? Power Automate, send me this approval action. And if I were to open this, and again, take a little closer look on it here. So what do I have? I have the, okay, so there's the invoice, right? That's cool, I can look at that. I can look at some of the data that's been extrapolated, and then I have the ability to approve or reject it right from the email. So now sometimes that's enough, right? Sometimes reviewers are just sort of yes or no. Other times reviewers have to partake in like the assignment of things, PO matching or account assignment, or potentially even picking the vendor. So I've also put a link here to drill that reviewer back to a review page. And what you're gonna see here is this review page allows me to apply permissions of what I could edit and what I can't edit. And now this reviewer could actually come in here and start editing stuff, right? Change different expense types or cost centers, etc. Okay, so that was my non-PO one, my PO one, same idea. Of course, the line items are gonna be different. They're gonna be PO items. I could help with that matching and edit these, etc. Or I could go ahead and accept it. Again, the reviews, if I'm more of a Teams fan, if I were to go to my Teams activity feed, I would see that same notification for a review in Teams. So I could review it here, add my comments, approve or reject it, do such things as follow up or reassign, etc. I have my link again. Teams has this cool app where I could see them all. Outstanding. Same idea there. If I'm more of a mobile guy, you better believe Power Automate also has a mobile app, and I could open that up and see all my actions there, right? So whatever your fancy. Because when I approve it on one, I'm gonna approve it on all of them. It doesn't really quote unquote matter where it gets approved. All right, so let's go ahead and approve one. This is good. Please pay the man. All right, so workflow could obviously keep going in life. For the sake of keeping this brief, I only have one tier of approval. So let's do that one. We'll start with one. So I now received a notification that's been approved, right? So I got a simple email there saying congratulations. If I were to go back to this dashboard, you could see it's still under review. But if I were to refresh my page here, what we're gonna see is that invoice is going to disappear on us. And it didn't, sorry, I want to do a hard refresh, make sure I have the latest and greatest. It didn't really disappear on us. It is just being filtered out. But if I clear my filter here, what we will see is this invoice now has an audit log of each step in the workflow that's been applied. I could see who it went to under review to, whether or not they approved or rejected it, and that it got submitted. Submitted means integrated in our language. That means it got integrated with the ERP. I also see all the notes captured. So that's cool, right? There's my comments of what I put. I approved it, so the notes are, I guess, are mildly entertaining, but if I would have rejected it, that's where I would have put the detail of why. We are using a permission model that only certain people could see certain invoices, so that's what that's all about. So if I went into this dashboard as like a manager, I would only see certain ones. And the last tab is the ERP that we've integrated it with. And again, we support all kinds of ERPs. So this happens to be Dynamics GP. I have another one up. If I were to clear this guy out, this is going to go into our friend Business Central. You know, I have different ERPs that we've integrated with over the years. Oops, that was a GP one too. Oh, I'm sorry, here's my BC one. So here's the transaction. So we've integrated with gobs and gobs of ERPs. If you want to go look at the list, you could go to our site and click on the top integrations, and we got a little blurb on all of the systems that we've integrated with. So let's go, for the fun of it, look at one of these, right? So this is integrated. We'll just pick Business Central for the fun of it. I have it up. And if I were to go into the purchase invoice, so our integration is real time, right? In other words, we call the web services of the underlying system and create that transaction immediately. So if I were to go down to the bottom of my list here, sorry, we got a lot of invoices. Having to clear some out probably, but too many demos. All right, so the latest and the greatest are always at the bottom, right? And we're gonna go ahead and pick one of these, and we really have to clear this out. I apologize. Let's do the search. Okay, that was fast. Let's go ahead and open this guy. Ooh. There it goes. And what you'll see here is here's our invoice that we've created, and we are going to have the line items associated to the invoice. This is actually the vendor record. Sorry, I clicked on that, but all of the invoices are in here as well. And then you could drill into those and see the details of the line that got integrated in real time. If you're more of a, you know, a GP fan, I do have that up as well. And if I were to go grab one that we've integrated there, but again, we integrate with gobs of ERPs. That's the one I just pushed through. You can see the distributions created there. And then of course we provide a drill back to that invoice so you can see it directly from the ERP as well. And in fact, this isn't going to drill back to the invoice itself. It's going to drill back to the review page so that I could see the notes and the audit log and all kinds of good stuff. The invoice, right? It's all available. Okay, so we are getting there. So the steps that we reviewed. Let's go ahead and bring this guy back. We went through the invoice receipt, we went to processing, we went through the accounting integration. A few things to know about, you know, an invoice automation is good as the OCR. So we are using a web-based OCR, and there's different methods of OCR. There's what's called zonal. This is if you've ever been involved on these projects over the years, the idea that you have to map vendor templates and things like that. We try not to use this unless absolutely necessary, and we prefer to use a machine learning OCR. The reason being, I don't have to maintain templates, right? Templates are a pain. Anytime a vendor changes their invoice format or I deal with a new vendor, I have to do something. And this is actually something you could test. So you could go to our website, again, dynamicpoint.com, and if I go to Products Invoice Automation and scroll all the way to the bottom, you could upload your own invoice and see how it works. So one of the last questions here, how well does OCR work? Give it a shot, right? We'll give you a link. And if you click that link, you could upload your own invoice and it'll perform OCR real time and give you the data right here on both a visualized tab as well as a raw data tab where you can see how well it extrapolates it. That's not gated, by the way. We're not collecting your email or anything, so have at it and see how well OCR could automate it, because every invoice automation is absolutely as good as the OCR. And according to my watch, we are right at time, so I'm going to say thank you for joining. Appreciate everyone's time. I do not see any questions currently, but I will leave you with my email there at info@dynamicpoint.com if you have any. And otherwise, I will thank you all and let you go back to your busy days. So take care, and I appreciate everyone's time. Bye now.